Camped was one of those planned reviews that I ended up scrapping in the same way as Community Service. But at the same time, I don't think that this episode is bad. In fact, it's actually good. It's actually one of the biggest positives of Season 5. Unfortunately, thinking about it now, I would say that this episode would have been much more better. And considering that this is another Loud House vs. Casagrandes vid, this episode is gonna be in competition with Zoo Emergency. These two episodes were released on the same day, May 31st, 2021. And considering that both of these episodes' themes is to save a camp and a zoo due to financial problems, I really assume that ever since I watched Zoo Emergency, it's shocking that Ryan isn't the main character. It's Sid and her family. Which is honestly odd when you take into consideration that for this video, it's about the Lau family versus Sid's family, instead of the Lau family versus the Casagrandes that you would usually expect, but that happened in the past. There's not much to discuss about the plots of these episodes. Well, in Camped, Lin So's favorite campground, Camp Macedon, is closing down. So, they go on a treasure hunt, which I'm gonna get to later. In Zoo Mergency, the Chain family, which is Sid's family, try everything in their passion and pride to save the zoo for the fundraiser. Sid came up with multiple ideas during the activities that she showcased, but unfortunately, it didn't convince her parents, not even a bit. With the themes of saving a camp and zoo for financial support, I usually expected the most ever since I watched both of these episodes. Here's the thing, the whole treasure thing in Camped, it just didn't suit for me. No, it's not because of the fact that it just shows the unrealism of the Loud House recently. It's just that doing a treasure hunt that is by a camp just really feels out in the ordinary, knowing full well that the only way you're gonna be able to find treasure when it comes to coins and jewels is becoming a pirate and going to an island to find treasure. But to give Camped credit, at least we get the introduction of Camp Macedon. In all honesty, the camp itself being new to the series, especially being one of the most highlighted elements in Season 5, is something I actually admire when it comes to Lin So willing to save the camp with his family by his side. With this environment having a Season 6 episode, I have to admit I'm actually looking forward to what they're going to be able to do with Camp Macedon in the future of the Loud House. Granted, it could be debatable, but for me personally, this is one of the major highlights that got me curious in the modern times of the Loud House compared to Seasons 1 through 3. Zoo Emergency takes a different route rather than having the Casagrandes be the main protagonists in this episode. Granted, Ryan and her family do contribute when it comes to the fundraiser, but considering that Sid is the main focus of this entire episode, it really shows that there was actual passion into making this episode. Like, as much as you do not like all the characters when it comes to the supporting role of the Casagrandes, it's not like that they're really annoying. I mean, granted, you can't be able to get into them completely, but the way I see it, it really feels like that this is basically the reality of what Great Lake City is compared to Royal Woods. Great Lake City Zoo is a location that we've went through multiple times before and after this episode. And considering that this show has this obsession to make animals friendly, which is in the same style as Lana's animals being friendly, I'm going to assume that they really wanted to expand the whole Lana being friendly with animals by making an entire zoo being the core focus of this entire episode. Because if you really think that Lana's animals wasn't enough, then this doesn't even compare to Lana's animals, because the animals that Sid and her family can keep in our house are a lot more. In fact, they completely normalize having animals in the apartment, especially since there was an episode where the Casagrandes need to protect the animals in order to stay inside of their apartments. This just shows that the weirdness involving animals around in Great Lake City, especially when it comes to the Casagrandes apartments, just goes to show that whenever I look at the animals in this episode from beginning to end, willing to help out to raise money for the fundraiser, this will have been more natural if this is what Lana wants when it comes to having a zoo of her own, but bigger. I'm just saying. And considering that most of these animals contribute to what Sid is trying to accomplish, makes me convinced that Sid is willing to make things right for the animals, and including her parents. Though then again, it just shows that her parents are still not on board with her ideas, but we're gonna get to that much later. Getting back to camp, the reason why there's treasure by camp is because Captain Kit a long time ago found treasure and hid it by camp. I'm honestly have no words to describe how random this is. Here's the thing. This isn't the worst unrealistic element involving the Loud House, but at the same time, they could have done it a lot more better if it didn't involve a treasure hunt. When the characters arrived to Camp Macedon, they were enjoying themselves, so you would assume that what they're going to be doing is similar to what Zoo Mergency did when it comes to running a fundraiser, but considering that both episodes released on the same day, I'm going to assume that they didn't want to copycat each other completely. So, the Loud family goes inside this cave, which is where the treasure is located, and in all honesty, the fact that this episode's focus has nothing to do with the characters having a fun time at camp or doing something in order to run the fundraiser, in order to make the camp really good to be at, they ended up going inside of a cave. Look, I know that caves are technically somewhat common when it comes to camping, but considering that this is where the unrealistic tone comes into play, this is where I really had a difficult time enjoying the episode. Because when the Loud family found the treasure, it turned out to be fake. Yeah. And when they continue on with the cave, they actually found the treasure that has led to a huge leap of faith. Mainly, the only way for anyone to get out of the cave is to either jump out to make a huge leap of faith into the lake or whatever, but in all honesty, there is no explanation of the whole fake treasure until you reach further into the cave where you actually find more treasure that is actually real. Look, it's one thing that the characters themselves are enjoying themselves, not only camping but enjoying this whole treasure hunt, but considering it just raises more questions that if Captain Kit did find more treasure, didn't he realize that the treasure itself is fake? All the while that though is probably more questions on the fact that the cave itself is somewhat Indiana Jones temple designed stick or something, because it just feels really out of place knowing full well that Captain Kit is not only a pilot but an Indiana Jones expert. Maybe it's just me because I'm not into pilots, but the more I think about it, it really feels like that this episode wanted to be a camp episode, but also an Indiana Jones episode, which for me personally, the two just don't mix at all. When the fundraiser comes into play in Zoo Emergency, it honestly made me convinced that since that Sid is the main protagonist in this entire episode, it actually gives the episode more stakes knowing full well that Sid is trying to do something good, but at the same time, her attempts just isn't really working, knowing full well that it could end up in disasters for the zoo and the fundraiser. Stanley is a conductor who takes people anywhere when it comes to subways underground, and Becca is a zoologist. A zoologist that takes care of animals in Great Lake City Zoo. And since that these two characters are having doubts with Sid's plans, it really shows that they really care about her, but at the same time, they're unsure that Sid's plans will ever work. The realism in this episode is mainly Sid's plans not working out for her. Like, I understand that a cartoon doesn't need to be real, but when it comes to the elements in the audio seasons of the Loud House, I really appreciate it. Like, granted, there may be a few moments that makes the characters a bit too dumb, but on the other hand, compared to the IQs from the Loud House, I have to admit that in some occasions, this episode just showcases the highlights much more that overweighs the low IQ of characters. Granted, the Casagrandes isn't immune to these issues, but whenever I look at the dumb IQs in this episode, it's somewhat harmless, and for what it's worth, it actually delivered some decent jokes. Not good jokes, but at the same time, it's better than worse. Since this is the only time Sid ever had an episode dedicated to her without anyone, mainly Ryan, I have to admit, the fact that she carried the entire episode was honestly unbelievable, because she is hilarious and yet at the same time has a heart of trying to do the right thing, but at the same time, her parents always think otherwise. And that's really relatable, knowing full well that if you have a son or a daughter who have different ideals that you're not that you don't approve of, then you can really understand where Stanley and Becca are coming from. Just think about it. The Casagrandes, with Sid being one of the supporting characters, and the fact that this supporting character gets a major role in an episode, just goes to show that there was actual effort when it comes to this being an actual spin-off. While I understand that Sid's attributes is similar to Lisa when it comes to building robots, mainly Breakfast Bot, it doesn't change the fact that her role in this entire episode just goes to show that she's just trying to make a difference. Just like everyone else who made a difference in a few occasions when it comes to doing the right thing. And when it comes to Sid doing the right thing, it's just trying to raise the fundraiser for the zoo. Now, yes, she wasn't the only one who saved the zoo since the other people donated the money, but considering that she had a plan that involved 12 is Midnight, all the while that it just raised more money, let me tell you, I'm going to assume that's pretty much on the same levels of the Loud family saving the camp by donating all that treasure that they found at the end of the cave in order to save Camp Macedon. Granted, I understand that the treasure that they found was much more valuable than the money that Sid owned at the end, but since we're talking about dollar bills, it's honestly an accomplishment that is worth mentioning, because the fact that Sid used K-pop in order to save Great Lake City Zoo is enough for us to understand that 12 is Midnight is becoming really exclusive to the Casagrandes, but also being a contribution to basically anything that helps anyone's solutions. I've seen this material before where if you have a solution that fixes everything just instantly goes back to the way they were, thanks to that one element. Though, if I'm gonna be perfectly honest, the fact that Sid has an obsession with 12 is Midnight, mainly Luke Kwan, which isn't obvious if you watch my video on Really Loud Music versus Operation Popstar, then I guess nothing is further proof once you watch that episode of Operation Popstar, which came out after this episode. Getting back to camp, since that there was no minor solution to resolve the Loud siblings' situation of saving the camp, it really shows that they really wanted to make the return of Linsaw's father in order to make it much more good, because he doesn't appear towards the end, and we only see bits and pieces of him in flashbacks when Linsaw explains his past involving Camp Mastodon. With him being one of the new characters in the newer seasons, I have to say that he is one of the better characters, which is saying a lot when it comes to the characters that change for the worse, or just the new ones. And when I mean change for the worse, I mean Mr. Bohofenal, but considering I'm talking about Gramps here, he's basically a dime a dozen when it comes to the new additions of characters of this show. After watching Bummer Camp, I'm actually looking forward to seeing him return. Granted, it may be debatable if Camp Mastodon will have another 22-minute episode, but at the same time, there are still possibilities. Granted, we can only hope that the next Camp Mastodon episode doesn't turn out terrible. It's worth noting that there is no subplot in Camp, while Zoomergency does while Adelaide needs to save Monolith since the zoo is closing forever. In all honesty, Adelaide is basically like Lana and mostly Lola, but really in a sweet and nature side, knowing full well that she actually cares about animals way more than you actually think. But at the same time, she is responsible for releasing all the animals from their cages. Then again, she is also becoming like her mother when it comes to her support towards animals. If I'm going to be honest, with Adelaide having the same attributes as Lana, I'm starting to convince that there's probably going to be a future planned episode involving Adelaide and Lana together. But if that's not going to happen, then I'm going to try to find an Adelaide episode that is similar to a Lana episode, but let's be honest, it's going to be a lot more difficult because I just found one Lana episode that is similar to a Casagrandes episode that has nothing to do with Adelaide. It has everything to do with her animals, but not herself. With that being said, there was nothing else to talk about these two episodes other than Zoo Emergency is the better episode over Camped. Because the fact that this episode had nothing to do with the Casagrandes being the main protagonists, it's honestly a huge accomplishment. And something I didn't think it was actually possible. Like, out of all the episodes, well, the Casagrandes 22-minute episodes aren't superior over the Loud House aside from Phantom Freakout, we actually get to see an episode that was released on the same day as Camped being a superior episode. For me personally, I felt like that this episode is a good demonstration of what a spin-off should do, and as much as I stated this multiple times, you need to understand that if you do an episode like this, you really need to make it really interesting with an interesting twist by having supporting characters have the major role other than the characters who are the main protagonists of the entire show. Camped just isn't one of the best episodes in the entire series. Now when it comes to season 5, that's debatable, but when it comes to the issues that I have with it, I'm sorry, I just can't take it seriously. Like, regardless if you say that treasures can be different things other than booty for pirates, but in all honesty, it really feels like that I'm just thinking way too much, knowing full well that this is one of the later seasons of the Loud House. Yes, I understand I'm being way too biased when it comes to season 1 through 3 episodes of Loud House, but at the same time, once I get into the problems of the Loud House, in the same way as I discussed Lincoln Loud's character last year, you might understand. let me tell you, that planned video is gonna be discussing nearly all the characters that hasn't been talked about. And considering I talked about Lincoln Loud, you pretty much know where I'm going with this. Just you wait. It won't be as long as the Lincoln Loud video, but you never know. With that being said, I'm giving Camped a 7.75 out of 10, while Zoo Emergency gets a 9 out of 10.